Hello and welcome to another episode of Foodie. On this episode we will be making and eating red velvet cake. The reason for today's episode, which is different from the Japanese food that has been done in the past, is because today, August 15th, is Julia Child's birthday, which means I'm going to celebrate her life in the form of red velvet cake. What we will be needing first is, I don't want to mess up this t-shirt, so I'm going to be putting on my cooking gear. 1 minute. Ta-da! Yes, I have a chef jacket. So I'm prepared to make anything. The ingredients for today's episode are, don't mind my eyes, I'm looking at something, 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of cocoa, 1.5 cups of granulated sugar, 2 eggs, 1.5 cups of canola oil, 1 teaspoon of vinegar, 1 bottle of red food coloring, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 cup of buttermilk, and that's just for the cake. For the cream cheese frosting, which is the most yumminess of the cake, we will be 1/2 cup of butter or margarine, depending on what you prefer, 1 8-ounce package of cream cheese, 1 box of confectionery sugar, and 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla, and 3 greased and lined cake trays. Hopefully there'll be enough for 3. If not, I'll make 2. Maybe have extra for cupcakes. Who knows? This whole entire recipe I found via the Food Network, so I will put the link below in the doodly-doo, so you can look on it or whatnot. Using the sifter, you start sifting through flour, cocoa powder, and baking soda. You make sure that none of the clumps are left in, hence why you are sifting. Once you're done, the combination will look very smooth and refined. In a beater, you add the eggs and the sugar, and you beat until they're very smooth. Once smooth, you add in the flour a little bit at a time to make sure that it doesn't poof out and explode everywhere. Once it's been mixed in, you can add more. Remember always to scrape down the sides. Then add the oil, the vinegar, and the vanilla. Then add the remaining of the flour. Never a bad idea to scrape down the sides. After this, make sure it's on and add a little bit of buttermilk at a time. Again, you don't want any splashing, and you don't want it to be overly mixed. After it's been fully mixed, start adding the red food coloring. You can add as much or as little as you wanted. I wanted mine to be like a pale pink because I didn't want it to be overly red and shockingly red. So I put in quite a few drops to get the color that I wanted it to be. The whole time you are putting the red food coloring, make sure that you're mixing it because you want every part of the cake to have red. You don't want splotches of different colors in there. Now that the cake batter has been fully mixed, it will be set aside until the oven has been fully preheated, which will be at 350 degrees. Now we're going to start on the icing. First we're going to take some confectionery sugar, a whole bag of it, and sift it again because, again, we don't want any clumps when we're making the frosting, and when it's sifted it will be perfectly fine. In the mixer, we're going to add the butter and the cream cheese and blend it until it's really creamy. Don't forget that putting a spatula down the sides is always a good idea. From here, we're going to slowly add the confectionery sugar, which will turn it into frosting. Also, we're doing it slowly because we don't want anything to pop off the sides. Remember to scrape down and have everything in the bowl combined for a very light and airy frosting. Add the vanilla extract at last to make sure that all the flavors have been combined. The cake batter poured into 2 separate trays, which will bake for 35 minutes, and then checked to make sure that the inside was fully moist. Then it was on a tray for 10 more minutes. After that, I sliced one of the cake's tops in half to make it smoother, and then frosting began. To make sure everything was correct, I put foil around the underneath the cake to make sure that none of the frosting would get onto the tray that I have put the cake on. It's really helpful because then you can just rip it off underneath and the cake will be fine and the tray will look awesome. Now we start off with some of the cream frosting. I made sure to put some of it in a piping bag so I could get the middle done. Usually you have a spatula if you're a fancy cake person, but I just used a knife with a very smooth edge and started frosting the cake. I put about maybe a fourth of the frosting in the middle, and then I'm going to save the rest for the rest of the cake. After sure it's flat, I put the other cake on top of it and made sure to flatten down. Then I covered this with more frosting and began frosting the whole cake. I haven't had much experience in cake since this is about my first cake, so I just remembered what I learned on the Food Network and started covering the sides with frosting before tackling the top of the cake. I tried to make it as smooth as possible, and I think I accomplished that. So I want to make sure that all the sides and every part was covered in the frosting. Surprisingly, for the frosting, which I thought would cover 3 cakes, it did a very good job and there wasn't too much in one area or not in another. This is my final product before I remove the foil. And look at the pretty cake that came out. Hi, so I thought I would just tell you about how the cake turned out. There will be a picture. And it turned out to be really nice and beautiful, and I had a piece, but I was with family, so I decided not to film it. What someone did point out to me was it kind of reminded you of pink velvet because it's very light. There was not much cocoa, there was only a teaspoon of it, so it was not as chocolatey as some other red velvets were, and it was just like a light, savory, not super sweet, which I actually like because really sugary velvet makes you like queasy, and I don't really particularly like that. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode of Foodie. I really did. There'll be definitely another of me involved in the kitchen one coming up. If you guys have any suggestions on something I would like to make, please let me know. I like getting feedback on these videos, so feel free.